Welcome to the Freedom Camp Podcast, rooted in truth, growing in freedom, and built on the belief that you weren't meant to grow alone. Each week, I'll share honest stories, insights, and simple questions to help you explore the unseen things that keep you from living in the freedom that's already yours. And take brave, intentional steps toward the life you were made for. This is your space to reconnect with your authentic self and grow in freedom on purpose. I've been noticing something lately. Many of us talk about wanting to have a deeper connection with others. We want our spouse to understand us. We want our kids to share their lives with us. We want friendships where we can really be known. And we want to be understood and seen. And we want to truly see and understand others too. But how can someone really know me? But how can someone really know me if I don't know what's going on inside of me? Because I've noticed something in myself and through coaching with other women. Ask us what happened, we will tell you. Ask us what someone did, and we have got the details. Ask us what we thought about it, and we may give you a whole dissertation. But ask, what did you feel? And sometimes there's silence. And I don't think that's because we don't have feelings about it. I think it's because we don't have language to understand and communicate what we feel. We've been exploring emotions this month in Freedom Camp for Soul Month. And I noticed something interesting. I asked the Freedom Campers what are some emotions that they have difficulty or they don't enjoy feeling and processing through those emotions. And they would say things like being disrespected or being ignored or being ghosted. And while all of those are real experiences, they're not emotions. And see how they're connected to what someone else does. So being ignored, for example, might leave me hurt or angry or rejected or powerless or embarrassed. But while two people can experience the same thing and feel completely differently about it, there's more to it than just being ignored. Which means knowing what happened isn't the same thing as knowing what you're feeling about what happened. And I started wondering how much that matters when what so many of us so desperately want is more connection. Several years ago, I was on a red-eye flight back from Mexico or from San Diego after crossing the border in the middle of the night, after staying with a wonderful woman who has become a friend of mine that runs a shelter for abused women outside of Tijuana. And I went there by myself and just hung out for a few days. And this dear woman is just an absolute wealth of emotional intelligence and emotions and experiences and stories. And I was able to just pour my heart out with her as I always am. And in return, get a lot of language back to me. So as I was flying back across the country, I distinctly remember hearing in my mind, por supuesto, por supuesto, again and again and again. And having just come back from Mexico, I knew that that was or is, of course, in Spanish. And so I was able to then kind of dig in on the plane, and I figured out in prayer from the Holy Spirit that what was happening was the Holy Spirit was giving me permission to feel, essentially saying, well, of course, of course. And so for me, the problem at that time wasn't always that I couldn't identify the emotion. Sometimes I knew perfectly well that I was angry. My problem was I didn't think I should be. The way that I experienced my upbringing, I wasn't allowed to have emotions. I wasn't allowed to be sad. I wasn't allowed to be angry. And so as an adult, I still thought that I shouldn't feel those emotions. So what happened was, it was like in my head, when I would feel angry, I would then say to myself, like, it's not that big of a deal. Don't be angry. Let it go. You're fine. If you are angry, it'll start something, and we don't want to start something. Pray about it. Move on about it. And this little Spanish phrase, this little blessing from the Holy Spirit, has become incredibly meaningful to me, because the Holy Spirit was saying, por supuesto, of course. Of course you're angry because this thing happened to you. Of course you're disappointed because of this thing. Of course you feel hurt because of this thing. And not because I want to stay necessarily in those emotions, but it's more because every story that I'm telling myself about what happened isn't necessarily true. It's like, this is what's happening inside me right now. And I'm not inviting this emotion to move in and like become my identity, just to acknowledge its existence. So I've learned that giving myself permission to feel something often makes me more curious about it, rather than continue to be controlled by it. And of course, it helps me to then feel the feeling and then have it move on out. So here's the pattern that I'm noticing. If I can't communicate what I can't identify, then I can't invite you into an experience that I'm not allowing myself to have, which means it becomes very difficult for me to deeply connect, for me to deeply be known while remaining disconnected from myself. So one example would be something like if I were to say, you never listen to me. That is actually communicating accusation. I think it's communicating how I feel, but what the other person is likely hearing is, I think you did something wrong. I'm being critical. Nah, 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 nah. And underneath that, though, what's really going on, what would really be helpful for me to say, and what I have been learning to say, is, when you look at your phone while I'm talking to you, I feel dismissed. And underneath that feeling of dismissal, I feel hurt. Because being heard by you, being seen, being important to you matters to me. Those are two totally different conversations that have two totally different possible outcomes. First outcome, beginning of my marriage, that was how I communicated. Second outcome, good day, in the spirit, that's where we are, I don't know, 12, 13, I don't even know, whatever, years in. Totally different outcome. And guess what? There's even a deeper outcome to it. Because where emotional literacy stops sounding like clinical and stuffy and starts sounding relational and worth considering is in examples like this. I want to be known. I want my husband to know me, and I want to know him. And by me being able to suss out and communicate, oh, I'm feeling hurt because this is how I perceive this thing to be. It's a whole nother world. That said, emotional literacy isn't about becoming someone who walks around identifying 17 nuanced feelings before breakfast. It's about developing enough language for my internal world so that I can talk myself through feelings and choose when it's appropriate to invite another person into it. Instead of asking my spouse to decode my anger, I can begin by telling him what's underneath it. Instead of expecting a friend to know somehow that I'm feeling hurt, I can just say it. Instead of saying I'm fine when I'm absolutely not fine, I can become curious enough to figure out what is going on. And really, what it comes down to is, how can I ask someone else to know me when I'm unwilling or unable or not yet had the tools to understand myself? The other major benefit to this is with children, and honestly, even other adults. I'm certainly well into my adult years, and I'm still growing and learning in this. So, children or not, we'll just say with others, but particularly with children, emotional literacy can be profoundly helpful because we lend our children our emotional vocabulary until they develop their own. They start with good, bad, mad, sad, and that's great. But we can also offer, oh, you seem disappointed. I wonder, are you embarrassed? That looks frustrating. Are you angry, or did that hurt your feelings? You were really looking forward to that. Are you sad that didn't happen? We're not telling them what they feel, but we're offering language. And eventually, maybe they'll be able to tell us, I'm not mad, I'm embarrassed. Imagine what that changes in a family, in a marriage, in a friendship, in a workplace, in a conflict. And I know it might sound a little dramatic, but honestly, I genuinely think that emotional literacy makes the world a better place. People who can recognize what they're feeling, process it, communicate it without making it someone else's responsibility, and remain curious about another person's experience are better equipped for connection and for conflict. And there's another piece to this. What I feel is real, but what I feel doesn't necessarily tell me what is true. And those are both true at the same time. What I feel is real, and what I feel is not necessarily the truth. Say, for example, someone doesn't text me back, and I feel rejected. Well, the rejection I feel is real, but I don't actually know that I've been rejected. And I can honor that emotion without automatically believing the story that I've attached to it. And I think that's where so many of us disconnect from it, because we feel it, but we don't know that it's true. So then we tell ourselves not to feel it. And then we don't feel it, but we actually do feel it. And then the next time we talk to the person, we're kind of, ugh, and they're like, what? And on it goes. Not to mention all of that being stored in our bodies. So here is an experiment that I would love for you to partake in this week if you would like. Once a day, just catch one emotional moment and then ask what happened. Just the facts from like anyone's perspective, just the facts. Then what did I feel? Try to name one or two emotions, and then see if you can maybe go a layer deeper. So maybe you say you feel mad, and then you're like, oh, I feel hurt. Or maybe you're like, I'm stressed, and then it's, I'm overwhelmed. Or you're fine, but maybe you're actually disappointed. And then once you've found something that feels true, that you've identified what you're feeling, then give yourself a por supuesto. Of course. Of course you're disappointed or frustrated or sad or irritated or whatever it may be. Given what happened, of course you feel that way. And then for the extra special part that I really recommend you do, tell someone you love what you discovered. Not what they did wrong, not anything they need to fix, hopefully not anything to do with them whatsoever. Tell them something true about you. Tell them what you realized about yourself through doing this experiment, and help them to better connect with you. Emotional literacy isn't really about becoming better at naming emotions. It's about becoming more available for relationship with ourselves, with the people we love, and with God, por supuesto. Just imagine the impact it will have on your prayers. The more language I have for my internal world, the more of myself I can bring into a relationship, and the more curious that I can become about what's happening inside of someone else. And there's another part of this that I've been thinking about. What impact does increasing our capacity to experience the emotions we don't want have on our capacity to experience the ones we desperately do, like joy and delight and peace and contentment? Check out Kinfolk Collective on Substack for that one. I'll put the link in the show notes below. And speaking of going deeper, Freedom Camp's doors are opening soon for the last time in 2026. And if you've been listening to these conversations and wondering, what would it be like to do this work together? I'd love to talk with you. It starts with a short conversation, and it is not a sales call. I want to hear a little about who you are, what you're looking for, and answer any questions that you may have. If you're curious, there'll be a link in the show notes where you can learn more and set up a time to talk with me. So here's the question I'd love for you to carry this week. What would become possible in your relationships if you became more fluent in your inner world? Maybe name one thing that you couldn't name before, and perhaps let someone who loves you know a little more about you. Stay curious and keep becoming. Thanks for listening to the Freedom Camp podcast, where we believe freedom is nurtured from within and grows when you tend to it. If this stirred something in you, let it take root this week and see what grows. And if you enjoyed this or found it meaningful, please give the gift of a review, share it with a friend, and leave a comment below. It helps us build this podcast community because we weren't meant to grow alone.